Elon Musk, the man who has conquered space and revolutionized industries, had always taken pride in his ability to solve every problem with reason and technology. But today, he was faced with a challenge that even the greatest minds could hesitate before: religion. In an unexpected meeting, Elon Musk sat across from Pastor John, a man of unwavering faith in the unseen, and they began a debate not about technology or science, but about deeper questions: can religion coexist with reason? This conversation was not just an ordinary intellectual sparring. It was a clash of two different worlds, between the hope for a scientific future and the belief in something intangible, transcending all calculations. You wouldn't believe what happened next as these two men began searching for answers to life's greatest questions. Elon Musk, one of the greatest minds of the century, who has changed the world with his groundbreaking inventions in technology and space, was now faced with a question he had never encountered before. In the quiet space of a modest room, Elon wasn't hearing scientific arguments or his ambitious projects, but a question from Pastor John, a man who had led thousands of souls to find peace and faith in something greater than what the eye could see. Pastor John looked at Elon, his voice deep yet filled with unshakable confidence, as if every word he spoke carried divine strength. "Elon," he began, "you've changed this world with your intellect and vision. But I want you to think about this. Could everything in this world, from the stars in the sky to every moment in our lives, simply be the result of reason and science? Or could there be something greater? An invisible force that we cannot grasp?" Elon paused. A moment of silence before he spoke. "I get your point," he said, his voice even but with a hint of surprise. "But everything in this world can be explained. These are laws that we can identify and use. Whether it's gravity or quantum theory, it all can be explained. Every occurrence has a clear cause and effect." Pastor John quietly nodded, but his eyes never left Elon. "Yes. But have you ever wondered if those laws are just manifestations of a deeper principle? Something that cannot be measured by machines or explained by equations. I believe there is a powerful being who set those laws, created this universe and all life within it, with a purpose we cannot fully understand." Elon felt something inexplicable in Pastor John's words. He blinked, trying to picture what he had just said. "So, you're saying that everything we see, from distant planets to tiny creatures, is created by an invisible force? How can you prove that? How do you know it's true?" Pastor John didn't hurry to answer. He merely smiled softly, his gaze as if seeing through all of Elon's doubts. "Faith is not something that can be measured in a lab, Elon. Faith is when you accept that there is something beyond the reach of reason and senses. Something we can only feel with our hearts. You can observe the world around you, admire its beauty and perfection, and wonder if all of this could just be a coincidence. Could this universe be a random occurrence without purpose? Or is there truly a force orchestrating everything?" Elon sat in silence. Each word from Pastor John felt like a wave crashing into his heart, forcing him to think about something he had never seriously considered before. Every theory, every scientific hypothesis seemed to fade in the face of the question that Pastor John had raised. Could it be that this life, this universe, is the result of a design more wondrous than anything humans can comprehend? And could belief in something superior be the answer to the questions he could not answer? Elon Musk leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on Pastor John, as if searching for an escape from the questions he had just been presented with. The scientific theories Elon had shaped throughout his life suddenly seemed fragile in the face of the intangible and vague concepts Pastor John was speaking of. "So, you're asking me to believe in something that I can't perceive with my senses, can't explain with axioms and equations?" Elon spoke, his eyes revealing doubt. "I have spent my whole life understanding the world through evidence, data. How can I believe in something that has no proof? No way to test it?" Pastor John held his gaze patiently and responded gently. Not with a rebuttal but with a warm smile. As if he fully understood what Elon was going through. I understand. Elon. You've always seen the world through the lens of science. Of precise numbers. But belief. It's not something you can grasp with logic or theory. Belief is the ability to recognize that there are things in life that we cannot explain or measure. It is the awareness that there is something beyond everything we understand. Elon sat in quiet reflection. Every word of Pastor John seemed to wipe away a layer of dust, leaving behind a space in his mind that had never existed before. He began to wonder if he had been overlooking something very important in life. Something that science could not grasp. Silence enveloped the room, as if time had stopped. The conversation was no longer just about the divide between reason and belief. It had become a journey, a quest between what was known and what had yet to be discovered. Elon felt an invisible breeze sweep through his mind, and the questions in his head grew more urgent. Could there be harmony between science and belief? Could reason accept the invisibility of faith without denying its nature? Pastor John was in no rush. He observed Elon, as if reading the struggles within him. After a while, he spoke softly, with empathy. You've witnessed the wonders of the world, Elon. But have you ever felt something you couldn't explain? A moment full of emotion when you look up at the night sky. When you feel a cool breeze pass by. Or when you stand at the heart of the universe and feel its infinity? Elon slightly closed his eyes. And in that moment, he felt like he was transported back to the times he couldn't explain. The times when he gazed at the vast sky. The moments of awe at the beauty of the universe that he had always regarded as natural wonders. But in this conversation, those emotions now carried a different meaning. Actually, I've had those moments. Elon spoke, his voice deepening. But I always thought it was just a passing feeling. Amazement at the beauty of the universe. I never thought there was something deeper in those moments. Pastor John smiled faintly. But it was the smile of someone who had seen something that Elon had yet to recognize. It is those moments, Elon, that are the beginning of faith. When you begin to realize that there are things in the universe that cannot be measured, cannot be explained. That is the sign of faith. Faith is not about having all the answers, but about opening your heart to receive things that cannot be explained. Elon sat still, saying nothing more. The questions continued to swirl in his mind. But now, he was no longer as certain as before. Could it be that faith was truly an important part of life that he had never seen? Could there be a way to reconcile the things he had once believed with the new concepts that Pastor John had just introduced? But Pastor John was in no hurry to finish. He let the air settle for a moment. Then once again, he looked at Elon with eyes full of empathy. Elon, remember that faith is not the denial of science, but a part of it. It is another depth that we have yet to explore. Something that we must learn to feel and accept. As Elon sat back, his gaze seemed to have broadened, as if a new horizon was slowly unfolding before his eyes. Perhaps, one day, he would find a way to reconcile reason and faith. But for now, his journey was still ongoing, full of challenges and questions without answers. The room became quiet, Elon's breath growing rapid like an uncontrollable heartbeat. In his mind, conflicting thoughts kept flowing, like waves that never ceased. He had always prided himself on his analytical abilities, on science, where everything could be explained by theory. But now, facing Pastor John, he felt as though he was confronting something that could not be easily explained. There was something in his words that touched a deep corner of himself that he had never considered. Pastor John quietly observed, noticing the subtle shift in Elon's eyes. He understood that this conversation was no longer just a debate about science. Something was slowly changing in Elon's thoughts. Something that he could feel. Though he couldn't yet name it. He decided that, since they had started, he would not give up easily, and would challenge Elon to take him to a new threshold. You know, Elon, Pastor John began, his voice deep and steady. You once said that only what can be verified is trustworthy. But I want to ask you about something very basic. Very human, trust. Can you talk about trust in a relationship? Or even loyalty? Can we capture those with measuring tools? Or is it all just a fleeting feeling? Invisible yet real? Elon paused for a moment, surprised by his question. He couldn't immediately explain. And he realized that this question couldn't be answered as simply as the scientific problems he usually faced. Trust. I think it could be a feeling, Elon tried to reason. But we can see chemical reactions in the brain when we trust someone. Something could also be described by science. Right? Pastor John smiled. Not a smile of victory, but a gentle smile of understanding. That's true. But do we only need to stop at those reactions? Just because something can be measured doesn't mean we understand it all. Trust is not just biological reactions in our bodies. It is something bigger. A connection that we cannot see, but we can feel. Elon sat silently, trying to absorb what he was saying. He had always lived with the belief that everything must have a theory, must have a clear scientific basis. But what Pastor John had just said felt like a challenge to all of that. So what you're saying is trust is not just a theory. It could be something we feel. And we don't always need to see or verify it? Elon asked, surprised that his own thoughts could raise such questions. Pastor John didn't rush to answer. He simply replied softly. Exactly. Trust is something we don't need to see. But we can feel it clearly. It is what drives us to do things beyond reason. What helps us stand firm in difficult times. And sometimes, that cannot be explained by theory. It can only be felt by the heart. The tension in the room gradually became stifling, as if every word was creating an invisible pressure. Elon could not help but feel the weight of the conversation. Each of Pastor John's questions forced him to face something he had never had to confront before: faith. He was used to solving every problem at work with data, analysis, and solid reasoning. But now, he was facing a different challenge. A challenge that couldn't be measured, couldn't be controlled. I don't understand, Elon said, his voice lowering. We're talking about faith. But what is faith if not just vague emotions? Things that can't be proven? I can't rely on things like that to build a future or make decisions. How can I trust something I can't see? Can't verify? Pastor John didn't rush to reply. He quietly observed Elon, knowing that a simple answer wouldn't be helpful. He had to find a way to lead Elon deeper into the issue. Think about it, Pastor John began, his voice gentle but deep. Every day, you use things that you never see, never test, but you still rely on them. You trust gravity, right? You can't see it, can't touch it, but you know it exists. It doesn't need to be proven because it governs everything around you. Elon hesitated for a moment, then looked up at Pastor John with a skeptical expression. But gravity is something I can feel. I can see an apple fall to the ground. I can understand why it happens. Faith, it's different. How can I be sure it exists if I can't see it or verify it? Pastor John smiled, his eyes reflecting understanding. Well, he said, you can see the light, right? But you can't grab it. Can't hold it in your hands. You can only feel its presence when it shines on the things around you. Faith is just like that light. You don't need to see it directly to know it exists. It influences the way you see the world, how you face challenges, how you connect with those around you. Elon was silent, as if Pastor John's words had awakened something within him. He still couldn't fully understand. But that feeling, something invisible yet so powerful, seemed to be inviting him to come closer. So, you're saying faith can be something invisible but can change the way we live? Elon asked, his gaze becoming more serious. Exactly, Pastor John replied, his voice like a calm wave amidst a storm. Faith is not the abandonment of reason. It's not blindly following something without understanding. It's being open to things that science can't yet explain. Like when you look at a star. You know it's there, even though its light may have faded long ago. Faith allows us to see things that the naked eye can't. Elon closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had lived in a world filled with technology, data, and theories that could be verified. But Pastor John's words made him reflect on another aspect of life he had never really taken the time to explore. Perhaps the only way to discover it was to free his heart more. To believe in things that couldn't be explained, but instead just felt. So, faith isn't something I need to fully understand, Elon said, his voice thoughtful. It's a feeling. An openness. Right? Pastor John looked into Elon's eyes, a soft smile appearing on his face. Yes, Elon. Faith is not something you can grasp with your hands. But if you let it guide you, it will help you see a different world, a world not only measured by numbers and data but also by the heart and soul. Elon remained seated, contemplating what he had just been told. That feeling, an opening, something new, was still not entirely clear. But at least he began to sense that it was present in his mind. The auditorium seemed to awaken, the atmosphere becoming eerily quiet, each breath of those present becoming heavier. The conversation was no longer just a confrontation between reason and faith. It was the clash of two worldviews. On one side was Elon Musk, who had conquered every limit of science and technology, and on the other, Pastor John, who had dedicated his life to guiding souls to find purpose and peace through religious faith. And now, they both stood at an important crossroads, where their knowledge was no longer enough to solve everything. Elon placed his hand on the table, his fingers tapping out a steady rhythm. But in his mind, everything was spinning, each thought like an unfinished puzzle piece. He had always been someone who could find solutions, who could guide every problem to a logical outcome. But now, a huge question stood before him, one that couldn't be solved with data or calculation. Could there be harmony between science and faith? Between what can be proven and what can't be seen? Pastor John looked at Elon with warm, patient eyes. Elon, I'm not asking you to change everything you believe, but I hope you can open your heart to the possibility that there is a reality beyond what we can observe. A world that operates under laws we can't always explain, but we still must trust. Elon closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to extinguish the ambiguity in his mind. He felt the vagueness in Pastor John's words, as if there was something he couldn't fully grasp. But it was something that he couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a debate about right and wrong, it was a journey into the nature of existence, of the connection between humans and the universe. The room fell silent, as if drawn into this still moment. But the air still carried a sense of anticipation, an expectation that some door would open. Elon was no longer in a hurry as he usually was. His hands were clasped together, his face lost in thought. This conversation had taken a turn he hadn't expected. He had always been accustomed to finding answers to problems. But now, he couldn't find that answer within himself. Pastor John, sensing Elon's hesitation, gently continued, his voice soft yet persuasive. You're a person who has changed an entire industry, who has pushed humanity into space. You can see and control everything that you create. But I want you to think about this. Do you understand everything you're doing? You know how things work. But can you explain all the mechanisms in detail? Elon looked at Pastor John, his eyes filled with surprise. Maybe I can't, he admitted, his tone softer than before. There are things I can't fully explain, but I still believe in it. Believe in how everything works. Pastor John nodded, his face showing deep understanding. That's the key, Elon. The things we believe in don't always have to be seen or measured. But it's that belief that forms the foundation for everything to work. Even if we can't understand everything. Elon thought for a moment, a strange feeling rising within him. What Pastor John had said was no longer just a religious theory. It was a truth he had never considered before. Maybe I don't fully understand, he admitted. But maybe I need to think about things that the mind can't grasp. Pastor John smiled, his eyes full of understanding. That's right, Elon. Because sometimes, we must know when to let the heart lead, instead of just relying on the mind. Elon sat still. The silence in the room seemed to slow down as he tried to take in what Pastor John had just shared. He was someone who always asked questions, seeking evidence. But this time, a part of him felt curious. He wondered if there might be something greater than all he had known, a force invisible to him that he had never thought of. Have you ever asked yourself? Elon, Pastor John began, his voice warm. If everything we see around us, the universe, life, love, could all be the result of something beyond our understanding? Elon thought for a moment, the feeling of confusion still lingering. I think it's just natural phenomena, he replied, trying to clarify his thoughts. The laws of physics have shaped everything. We can explain everything that way. Pastor John paused for a moment, his eyes as if trying to convey something deeper. It is those very laws that allow us to exist. But what if there is a cause behind them? What if there is a beginning from a different source? Something unseen that influences everything around us? Elon felt the air in the room grow thicker. He had put all his focus on exploring the universe, uncovering theorems. But now, a larger question was making him think. Maybe I was wrong, he whispered to himself. Because I've never thought about that. Pastor John continued, his voice neither hurried nor dismissive, but full of understanding. It's not an admission of weakness, Elon. Faith is not always based on scientific evidence. It can be something that helps us stand firm when we can't explain something. Something that keeps us grounded when there are no answers. Elon looked at him, the words hitting his heart. He was so used to seeking answers through theory. But now, he was starting to realize that there were things that couldn't be measured. Things that couldn't be explained with formulas or numbers. Faith, or even understanding in such a complex world, might be the key to understanding oneself better. But how do I know if it's real? Elon asked, the uncertainty evident in his eyes. Pastor John smiled gently, a smile full of compassion. Faith doesn't need to be verified. It's simply the acceptance that there are greater things than we can understand. That among the countless random events, there may be a guidance we haven't seen. Faith is what keeps us together in our darkest moments. Elon sat still, feeling as though time had stopped. Thoughts spun in his head. A conflict between the scientific world he had pursued for years and what Pastor John had just said. He had always trusted the explanation of reason, that humans could understand and control everything. But now, Pastor John's words hit him like waves, making him begin to question if there was something greater he had never acknowledged. Pastor John looked at Elon with sincere eyes, his voice as if guiding him through a path he had never considered. Faith is not about having all the answers, but the ability to stand firm before questions that we can't answer immediately. It's accepting that there's something beyond our understanding, and trusting that there's a reason behind things we cannot see. Elon stopped breathing for a moment, his mind awakening, the pieces of his thoughts starting to shift. He had been so familiar with the logic of technology and science. Things that could be controlled. Things that could be seen and measured. But now, everything seemed vague. No longer just simple numbers, but something invisible he couldn't grasp. He opened his mouth, trying to find words to express the new emotions rising within him. I always thought that as long as we found the scientific answer, everything would become clear. But now, I'm not so sure. There may be something bigger than I thought. Something I can't explain. Pastor John did not respond immediately. His gaze calm, as if giving Elon time to absorb each of his words. That's exactly what I want you to feel. The acknowledgement that not everything can be measured or analyzed. But it still exists. And it can have a powerful impact on our lives. Elon looked into Pastor John's eyes, feeling a strange sensation within him that he had never experienced before. As someone who always sought control, this made him feel helpless. Perhaps, in this life, there are things that humans cannot fully understand, cannot explain clearly, but can feel in a miraculous and profound way. Maybe I've overlooked something important, Elon whispered, his voice softer, as if questioning himself. Something I can't see, but that could change the way I perceive this world. Pastor John smiled, his gaze full of understanding, not judgment, but simply empathy. Yes. And when you begin to open your heart to that, life will become bigger and more meaningful, even if it's not always explainable. Elon stood up, a part of him feeling as though he had just uncovered a part of himself that had been buried for so long. This story was no longer a confrontation between science and religion. It had become a personal journey, a quest, a step into an unexplored space, where faith might be the key to guiding him. When they parted ways, Elon no longer felt the need to choose between two worlds, but rather realized that a part of him was still searching for things beyond comprehension. And it was these things that would lead him to new paths, new horizons he had never thought of. Elon left Pastor John's room, his mind heavy with conflicting thoughts. Pastor John's words echoed in his mind. With each step he took, he felt like he was walking down a vague path, full of challenges but also full of hope. He looked at the sky, the white clouds drifting slowly, wondering if the world he had spent his life trying to understand was truly all there was. Could there be a power he had never recognized? Something greater than all the numbers and theories he had built? The next day, Elon returned to his office. The projects were waiting for him. Research was still ongoing, and the grand goals in technology were still there. However, there was a shift in the way he viewed them. Before, every time he faced a challenge, he would immediately think of solutions, creative answers based on science. But now, he began to feel a strange humility. Perhaps the questions he didn't have answers to, the pieces he couldn't find, were part of a bigger picture that he wasn't yet capable of seeing. He thought about the late nights, when everyone else had left, and he sat alone in the office, facing the numbers, the devices, and the software he had created. But now, there was no comfort in the technology he once relied on. He felt like a child just beginning to take his first steps into a vast and complex world. The achievements he had once been proud of were no longer bright milestones but mere pebbles in a giant picture he could not yet see. Whenever he thought about what Pastor John had said, those words kept him thinking. Faith is not finding all the answers. It's trusting in something beyond the limits of humanity. It was a perspective he had never considered. And even though there were still many unanswered questions, perhaps believing in something greater was what he needed to continue this journey. A week later, Elon decided to attend a discussion with a group of religious researchers. Unlike the meetings with scientists, this was a space where science was not the focus, but rather faith, the connection between humans and the universe, and an invisible power. These conversations were not centered around explaining or analyzing, but rather sharing experiences, feelings, and the deep connections that humans could feel. There, Elon met Clara, a young researcher working on the relationship between science and religion. Clara had proposed a theory about the connection between science and faith, suggesting that the two were not opposites, but could complement each other. She explained that believing in something greater was not the abandonment of reason, but the expansion of the mind to accept things that reason could not measure. Elon felt a resonance in Clara's words. The perspectives she shared helped him reassess himself and the choices he had made throughout his life. She spoke about unanswered questions and how they could lead humans to deeper truths. Truths that went beyond what science could uncover. "We don't need to understand everything," Clara said, her eyes lighting up. "We just need to know that there are things greater than us that we can believe in. And that belief will help us continue walking the path ahead." Since that meeting, Elon had changed the way he viewed the world. He no longer lived only in a world of numbers, theories, and control. He began to learn how to embrace the things he could not explain. Events that could not be solely explained by science. He realized that, sometimes, the unanswered questions were the driving force that kept us searching, exploring, and evolving. Elon didn't abandon his passion for technology and science. But now, he understood that there was a large part of life he could not control or explain. And that didn't mean failure. It was simply part of his long journey. In the end, Elon had found harmony between two seemingly opposing worlds. He understood that science and faith were not conflicting elements, but complementary parts that helped him move forward not only with reason but also with heart and humility. In a world full of unanswered questions, faith in something greater had become the invisible source of strength guiding him on the unexplored path. Looking ahead, Elon no longer feared uncertainty. He knew that his journey had only just begun, and the miracles were still waiting for him far ahead. Note, this is a fictional story, created for entertainment and to convey meaningful messages about faith, progress, and self-exploration. All characters, events, and situations in the story are products of imagination and not real. The author does not intend to imply or relate to any individual, organization, or event in reality. The views and messages in the story are for illustration purposes only and do not reflect official or correct views. Readers should understand that this is a work of entertainment and should not consider it as truth or official advice.